After bidding farewell to my dying husband, tears streamed down my face as I stepped out of the hospital. But then I overheard two nurses whispering in hushed tones, their words carrying a shocking secret that sent a chill through my spine. What they said, it changed everything. My heart skipped a beat. I had just kissed Hunter's forehead for what I knew would be the last time when I stumbled into the hospital corridor, my vision blurred with tears. The oncology ward's automatic doors sealed behind me with a soft hiss, cutting me off from the man I'd loved for 12 years. My legs barely carried me to the elevator when I heard them. Two nurses near the medication cart, their voices low but clear in the empty hallway. "Did you process that insurance redirect for the Mitchell case like Marcus requested?" The first nurse asked, checking her tablet. "The one where the wife doesn't know about the secondary payout?" My hand froze on the elevator button. Marcus, Hunter's best friend, our financial advisor, the man holding power of attorney while Hunter lay dying. The shock of those words made me step back into the shadows, but my mind couldn't process them yet. Not when Hunter's last breath still echoed in my ears. Not when I could still feel the warmth leaving his hand as I held it. The nurses continued their conversation, unaware of my presence, and I remained frozen, caught between grief and a growing sense that something was terribly wrong. 3 years ago none of this would have been imaginable. Hunter and I had built our life with the careful precision of people who knew what it meant to work for everything they had. Our one-bedroom apartment downtown wasn't much, but it was ours. Every morning at 6, I would wake to find Hunter already dressed in his Brennan construction uniform, making coffee in our narrow kitchen while whistling whatever song had been stuck in his head from the radio. He would crack eggs into our single good pan, the cast iron skillet his grandmother had given us as a wedding gift, and ask about my upcoming shift at the hospital. Administrative coordination sounded more impressive than it was. I spent my days processing insurance forms, scheduling appointments, and managing databases at Presbyterian Medical Center. Hunter would joke that I knew more about medical billing codes than most doctors knew about medicine. But the job had excellent benefits, and combined with his construction salary, we were slowly building something solid. Marcus had been part of that foundation from the beginning. He and Hunter met in college, two kids from working-class families trying to make something of themselves. When Marcus went into accounting and Hunter into construction, they remained close in the way that men sometimes do, through fantasy football leagues, weekend beer sessions, and an unshakable loyalty that survived Marcus's rise into financial success and Hunter's steady blue-collar contentment. Every Sunday during football season, Marcus would arrive at our apartment with his wife Christina, carrying bottles of wine that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. "Brother from another mother," Marcus would say, clapping Hunter on the back, settling into our worn couch as if it were the leather sectional in his own suburban home. Christina would air-kiss my cheeks, her perfume expensive and subtle, complimenting whatever simple meal I had prepared while somehow making me feel both welcomed and inadequate. "You two work too hard," Christina would say, usually after her second glass of wine. "Marcus could help you invest better. Make your money work for you instead of the other way around." She worked at Southeastern Insurance Group, climbing the corporate ladder with her MBA and perfect manicure, while I filed papers and answered phones. But she never made me feel less than, not explicitly. She would share makeup samples from corporate events, gossip about her coworkers, plan double dates to restaurants we secretly couldn't afford. Those Sundays felt like family. Marcus and Hunter shouting at the television, debating plays and coaching decisions with the passion of men who'd never played beyond high school. Christina helping me in the kitchen, teaching me about wine pairings I'd never remember, both of us rolling our eyes at our husband's intensity over a game. The apartment would be too warm, too loud, too crowded, but alive in a way that made Monday mornings feel possible. Hunter and I had our own rituals beyond those social Sundays. Wednesday nights meant budget meetings at our small dining table, Hunter with his notebook, me with my laptop, calculating how much we could save each month. The refrigerator held our grocery list, meticulously planned to stretch every dollar. Friday nights meant dinner at Romano's, the Italian place 2 blocks away where Tony, the owner, would greet us like family and sometimes slip us a free dessert. "Next year," Hunter would say during our Wednesday sessions, pointing to the fertility clinic brochures we kept in a folder marked Future. The IVF consultation had been sobering, tens of thousands of dollars for a chance, just a chance at the family we desperately wanted. But Hunter was optimistic in the way that people who work with their hands often are. Problems had solutions. Everything could be built with enough effort and planning. I'll take on weekend projects, he promised. You can pick up extra shifts. We'll make it happen, Alexis. Can you imagine teaching our kid to throw a football in the park down the street? We even toured the 2-bedroom apartment 3 floors up when it became available, measuring rooms with our footsteps, debating paint colors for a nursery that existed only in our imagination. The rent increase would strain us, but by the time we needed it, we figured we'd have figured it out. That's what we always did, figured it out together. Everything changed 8 months ago. Hunter had gone for a routine physical, something his company required for insurance purposes. He'd been tired lately, but construction was demanding work. He'd lost some weight, but we'd both been trying to eat healthier. The blood work was supposed to be routine, checking cholesterol and basic levels. The call came on a Thursday. I remember because I was preparing my weekly reports when Hunter texted that he needed to talk to me about something important when I got home. No emoji, no context, just those words that made my stomach tighten with inexplicable dread. I found him sitting at our dining table, still in his work clothes covered in drywall dust, holding a letter from the doctor's office. His hands were shaking slightly, and Hunter's hands never shook. He'd run power tools and handled dangerous equipment for over a decade without incident. They found something in the blood work, he said, his voice steady but hollow. Pancreatic markers. They want me to come in tomorrow for more tests. They said to bring someone with me. The tests led to scans. The scans led to biopsies. The biopsies led to Dr. Morrison's office, where terms like stage 3 and aggressive treatment and statistical outcomes fell like hammers on our carefully constructed life. Pancreatic cancer at 34. The kind of diagnosis that didn't care about meal planning or savings accounts or nursery paint colors. Marcus stepped in immediately. You two focus on treatment, he said, arriving at our apartment the day after diagnosis with a briefcase full of papers. I'll handle the financial side. Insurance claims, treatment authorizations, managing your savings for maximum efficiency. That's what I do, Hunter. Let me do this for you. Hunter, already exhausted from the first round of tests and facing the tsunami of treatment ahead, signed the power of attorney papers without hesitation. This was Marcus after all. His brother from another mother. The best man at our wedding. The person he'd trust with his life, and now, as it turned out, with his death. The chemotherapy suite at Presbyterian Medical Center became our new reality 3 weeks after diagnosis. Hunter sat in the beige recliner, and 4 drip feeding poison into his veins while I held a pink plastic basin beneath his chin. The nurse had warned us about the nausea, but nothing prepares you for watching someone you love retch until their body has nothing left, then continue heaving anyway. 6 hours we stayed in that chair, Hunter's body rejecting the very medicine meant to save him. Marcus arrived during hour 4, walking into the treatment room with his leather briefcase and concerned expression. He pulled papers from his bag while Hunter dozed fitfully between waves of sickness, the medications finally providing brief moments of relief. I need you both to sign these, Marcus said quietly, spreading documents across the small rolling table meant for juice cups and crackers that Hunter couldn't keep down. Power of attorney paperwork. Just in case things get complicated with the insurance company. My firm can handle all the claims processing, make sure you get maximum coverage without the runaround. Hunter's eyes were barely open, his hand shaking as Marcus guided the pen. I started reading through the dense legal text, but Christina appeared then, carrying coffee and sandwiches from the cafeteria, distracting me with questions about Hunter's treatment plan. By the time I looked back, Hunter had signed everything, and Marcus was tucking the papers away with efficient movements. Don't worry about any of this financial stuff, Marcus said, patting Hunter's shoulder carefully as if he might break. That's what I'm here for. You two just focus on getting through treatment. The treatments became a brutal routine. Every other Thursday, we would arrive at 7 in the morning for blood draws, wait for counts to be verified, then proceed to the chemotherapy suite if Hunter's body could handle another round. More often than not, his white blood cells were too low, his platelets dangerously depleted, forcing delays that Dr. Morrison assured us were normal but felt like losing ground in a war we were already losing. Hunter's transformation happened gradually, then suddenly. First, his appetite disappeared entirely. The man who used to devour entire pizzas could barely manage 3 spoons of soup. His jeans began hanging loose, then falling off entirely, requiring a new wardrobe from the thrift store in smaller and smaller sizes. The muscle definition from years of construction work melted away, leaving sharp angles where strength used to be. One morning I found his wedding ring on the bathroom counter. Hunter stood in the doorway, his eyes red and swollen, holding up his left hand where the gold band had simply slipped off during his shower. Without a word, I took the ring and threaded it onto the silver chain I wore, letting it rest against my heart where it would be safe until his fingers could hold it again. His beloved tools migrated from the truck to our hallway closet one by one. The hammer he'd bought with his first paycheck. The level his father had given him before he died. The nail gun that had built dozens of homes across the city. Each tool represented another piece of Hunter's identity being carefully stored away, waiting for a recovery that seemed increasingly distant. "I'm useless," he whispered one night after spending 20 minutes trying to open a jar of peanut butter, his hands too weak to grip the lid. "Can't work, can't provide, can't even feed myself." I climbed into bed beside him, careful not to disturb the port installed in his chest for easier access. "You're fighting cancer, Hunter. That's your job right now. And you're not useless. You're the strongest person I know." But his eyes told me he didn't believe it. Every medical bill that arrived, every insurance explanation of benefits, every prescription copay became another weight on his conscience. Marcus visited weekly with financial updates, always in the evening when Hunter was most exhausted, spreading spreadsheets across our dining table with increasingly grim projections. "The experimental drug trial Dr. Morrison mentioned isn't covered," Marcus explained during one visit, his face appropriately somber. "Insurance considers it investigational. We're looking at $40,000 out of pocket just to get Hunter enrolled." Hunter's face went gray, and not from the chemotherapy. "We don't have $40,000. Your savings is down to about $15,000 after the deductibles and co-pays," Marcus continued, pulling out another sheet. "But there are options. You could sell the truck, maybe borrow against the life insurance policy. I can structure it so the payments are deferred until after treatment ends." Each suggestion carved another piece from Hunter's pride. The truck he'd bought himself after his first promotion. The life insurance policy meant to protect me if the worst happened. Everything he'd worked for being slowly liquidated to buy more time, though nobody would say how much time we were actually buying. Christina began appearing at the hospital during Hunter's treatments with increasing frequency, always carrying folders that needed urgent signatures. She would arrive when the pre-medications made Hunter drowsy, when his judgment was compromised by drugs and exhaustion. "Just routine insurance paperwork," she would say, her voice honey-sweet, those perfectly manicured nails tapping against the papers when I tried to read them carefully. "You know how these companies are. Everything in triplicate, signatures on every page. I'm trying to fast-track your claims through my department." Something about her eagerness made my skin crawl. The way she would check her phone constantly, texting someone while we signed. How she always positioned herself between me and the documents, pointing to signature lines while blocking the actual text with her hands. Once, when I insisted on reading everything, she sighed dramatically. "Alexis, I'm trying to help here. Do you want to spend 3 hours reading legal jargon, or do you want to hold your husband's hand while he goes through treatment? I've already reviewed everything. It's all standard forms." Hunter, green-faced and trembling from nausea, looked at me pleadingly. So I signed. We both signed. Stack after stack of papers that Christina whisked away into her designer bag, promising to process everything immediately. The bills kept coming despite our supposed excellent insurance coverage. Radiology charges that were supposedly out of network. Medication costs that weren't on the approved formulary. Laboratory fees that somehow fell outside our plan's scope. Each bill was a punch to Hunter's already fragile spirit. "Maybe we should sell the apartment," he suggested one particularly bad night, after a treatment that left him hallucinating from the anti-nausea drugs. "Move in with your mother in Seattle. At least then you'd have something left when I'm gone." "You're not going anywhere," I said firmly, though my voice cracked. "And we're not selling anything else. Marcus said he's working with the insurance company. These bills are probably just errors." But Marcus's assurances were becoming vaguer, his visits shorter. He would pat Hunter's shoulder, promise everything was under control, then leave quickly with Christina, both of them checking their phones as they walked to their luxury sedan in the hospital parking lot. The luxury sedan pulled away from the hospital parking lot, leaving me standing at the window of Hunter's room, watching his chest rise and fall in increasingly irregular patterns. The morphine drip had been increased twice since morning, and the nurses moved with that particular quiet efficiency that meant time was running out. Tuesday evening arrived with unexpected clarity. Hunter's eyes opened fully for the first time in days, focused and present in a way that made my heart leap with foolish hope. He gestured for water, and when I helped him sip through the straw, his hand covered mine with surprising firmness. "Alexis," he said, his voice rough but determined. "I need to talk to you. Really talk." I set down the water cup and took his hand properly, feeling bones too prominent beneath tissue paper skin. His wedding ring hung on the chain around my neck, catching the fluorescent light as I leaned closer. "I'm not going to make it to our anniversary," he said simply, cutting through any pretense. "We both know that. And I need you to promise me things while I can still hear your answers." "Hunter, don't. Please." His grip tightened, using strength I didn't know he still possessed. "Let me do this. Let me leave knowing you'll be okay." The tears came then, hot and unstoppable, but I nodded because denying him this conversation would be crueler than having it. "You're 31 years old, Alexis. You have so much life ahead of you. I need you to promise you won't stop living when I stop breathing." His eyes, still that brilliant blue despite everything, held mine steadily. "Find someone who makes you laugh again. Have those babies we dreamed about. Give them the life we planned, just with someone who deserves you. Nobody could replace you," I whispered, my throat tight with grief. "I'm not asking you to replace me. I'm asking you to continue. There's a difference." He paused, gathering strength. "Marcus has all the financial paperwork sorted. He promised me you won't struggle with money. The insurance, the savings he's managing, it should be enough to give you time to figure out what comes next." Something twisted in my chest at Marcus's name, but Hunter was still talking, urgency driving his words. "Don't refuse his help out of pride, okay? I know you want to handle everything yourself, but Marcus knows what he's doing. He's got your best interests at heart. Promise me you'll let him help you through the financial aftermath." I promised, because what else could I do? Hunter was using his last reservoir of energy to ensure I would be cared for, and refusing him that peace felt unconscionably cruel. He relaxed slightly, sinking back into the pillows, but his hand remained locked with mine. "I love you, Alexis Mitchell," he said, his voice fading. "Every minute of these 12 years has been worth it, even ending like this. You made my life complete." Those were the last fully coherent words Hunter spoke to me. By Wednesday morning he had slipped into a semi-conscious state, occasionally squeezing my hand but no longer opening his eyes. Dr. Patterson, who had been Hunter's oncologist through 8 months of failed treatments, asked to speak with me privately that afternoon. His office felt suffocatingly small as he closed the door behind us. The certificates on his wall, the family photos on his desk, the normality of it all seemed obscene while Hunter lay dying 3 floors below. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began, his voice gentle but direct. "Hunter's organs are shutting down. His kidneys have stopped functioning and his liver is failing. We're looking at 48 hours at most, possibly less." The words hit me physically like a punch I'd seen coming but couldn't dodge. "There's nothing else? We've exhausted all treatment options. At this point we're focused on comfort care. Keeping him pain-free." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "If there's anyone who needs to say goodbye, now would be the time. He may not be responsive, but hearing is often the last sense to fade. He'll know you're there." I stumbled out of his office, my legs barely functional, navigating the hospital corridors by instinct rather than sight. The chapel door appeared before me and I pushed inside, grateful to find it empty. The silence felt heavy, pressing against my eardrums as I collapsed into a pew. The scream that tore from my throat didn't sound human. I pressed my hands over my mouth, but the sound escaped anyway, raw and primal. 8 months of watching Hunter fade, of maintaining composure for his sake, of pretending there was hope when statistics said otherwise, it all erupted in that empty chapel. "Please," I begged whatever force might be listening. "Not yet. Give us more time. I'll do anything. Take years off my life and give them to him. Take everything I have, just don't take him." But the chapel remained silent except for my ragged breathing. No divine intervention materialized. No miracle manifested. Just a woman alone in a small room, bargaining with absence while her husband died by degrees down the hall. I stayed there until my throat was raw and my eyes burned dry. Finally, exhausted beyond measure, I accepted what I'd known for weeks but couldn't admit. Love wasn't enough to save Hunter. Neither was medicine, money, or prayer. Death was coming whether I raged against it or not. I walked back toward Hunter's room on unsteady legs, but the elevator was occupied, forcing me to take the stairs. The stairwell opened onto a small courtyard where hospital staff took their breaks, and I paused, needing air before returning to Hunter's bedside. 2 nurses stood near the concrete benches, one lighting a cigarette while the other scrolled through her phone. Their scrubs identified them as ICU staff, and their casual conversation drifted across the courtyard. "Did you process that Mitchell account adjustment?" the smoker asked, exhaling into the afternoon air. "Yeah, but it felt wrong," the other replied. "Those redirected payments to accounts his wife doesn't even know exist? That's fraud, plain and simple." My body went rigid. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. "Marcus Porter has been doing this for years," the first nurse continued. "Every terminal patient whose family trust him with power of attorney. He creates shadow accounts, redirects insurance payouts, makes families think they're broke while he's sitting on their money. Christina processes everything through Southeastern Insurance," the second nurse added. "She's the one who makes it look legitimate on paper. They've probably stolen millions by now." My knees buckled. I grabbed the wall for support as 8 months of financial terror suddenly made horrific sense. Every declined treatment, every suggestion to sell our possessions, every guilty look on Hunter's face when he thought he was leaving me with nothing. All manufactured by the man he called brother. The courtyard wall held my weight as the nurse's footsteps faded into the hospital. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a text from the ICU desk asking me to return to Hunter's room. I forced myself upright and walked back inside, my mind splitting into 2 distinct parts. One that needed to be present for Hunter's final hours, and another already calculating how to destroy Marcus Porter. I spent the next 36 hours at Hunter's bedside, holding his hand while his breathing grew shallower. The nurses moved quietly around us, adjusting medications and checking monitors with practiced gentleness. I talked to him about our first date, our wedding day, the furniture he'd built for our apartment. I told him I loved him over and over, hoping the words would follow him wherever he was going. At 3:17 a.m. Thursday morning, my phone rang. I was at home for the first time in 2 days, having been convinced by the nurses to shower and change clothes. The caller ID showed Presbyterian Medical Center. "Mrs. Mitchell?" The voice belonged to Shannon, the night nurse who'd been so kind to us. "I'm so sorry to tell you this over the phone, but Hunter passed away peacefully about 10 minutes ago. He wasn't in any pain." The expected words still knocked the air from my lungs. I thanked Shannon, told her I would be there within an hour to see him and collect his belongings. Then I hung up and sat perfectly still in our dark apartment. Grief demanded tears, demanded collapse, demanded the kind of breakdown I'd had in the chapel. But fury had crystallized into something harder and colder. I opened my laptop instead of crying, pulling up our bank account, then searching for the shadow accounts the nurses had mentioned. The passwords Hunter had shared during his lucid moments worked on more than just our primary accounts. Marcus, in his arrogance, had used similar login structures across multiple platforms. Within an hour, I had accessed 3 accounts I never knew existed, all opened in Hunter's name but linked to email addresses I'd never seen. $487,000. The number glowed on my screen like an accusation. Money that should have gone to experimental treatments, to better medications, to buying Hunter more time or at least more comfort. Instead, it sat in investment accounts generating returns for Marcus while my husband died believing he was leaving me destitute. I printed everything. Bank statements showing the redirections. Investment account summaries. Property records I found through public databases showing a vacation home in Colorado purchased 2 months ago by Marcus and Christina Porter for exactly the amount missing from what should have been our treatment fund. By sunrise, I had 3 binders of evidence and a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. That's when I found the email thread in Marcus's account. He'd been careless with his password during one of those Sunday football gatherings, typing it in front of me while logged into our Wi-Fi. The investment opportunity was spelled out in corporate speak, but the bottom line was clear. Marcus's firm was about to close on a major acquisition that would triple their value, but they needed liquid capital by Monday to secure the deal. The exact amount required matched what sat in those shadow accounts, give or take a few $1,000s. 5 days. The funeral would need to happen within 5 days. I called Marcus at 8 a.m., forcing tears into my voice that weren't entirely fabricated. Marcus? Hunter died this morning. His sympathy sounded so genuine I almost believed it myself. Oh, Alexis. I'm so sorry. He was like a brother to me. What do you need? How can I help? I can't think straight, I said, adding a sob for effect. The funeral home wants all these decisions made, and I don't know about insurance or death certificates or any of it. Could you help me arrange everything? You knew Hunter better than anyone. Of course, sweetheart. I'll handle everything. You just focus on grieving. When were you thinking for the service? As soon as possible, I whispered. Monday maybe. I just want this part over with. Monday. The day his investment deal needed funding. The day he'd be too busy playing the grieving best friend to manage the transfer. The trap was set. I made one more call, this time to a number I'd found online for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The agent who answered listened to my summary, then asked me to bring my documentation to their field office immediately. By noon Thursday, I sat in a federal building conference room while 3 agents reviewed my binders. Mrs. Mitchell, the lead agent, a woman named Sarah Davies, said carefully, "This is extensive evidence of fraud. We'll need to move quickly if that investment deadline is real. Can you maintain normal contact with Mr. Porter until Monday?" I nodded, my exhaustion suddenly visible. "He's helping me plan my husband's funeral. He'll be there. Christina too." Agent Davies exchanged glances with her colleagues. "We'll be there as well." Friday afternoon, my mother arrived from Seattle. Eleanor Brennan was 63 years old, sharp as a surgical knife and not easily fooled. She took one look at our apartment, at the medical bills stacked on the dining table, at my red-rimmed but dry eyes, and knew something was wrong. "Alexis." She set down her suitcase and studied me. "You called me Wednesday saying you had excellent insurance coverage. Now suddenly you're broke? And where are all of Hunter's things?" I pulled her to the couch and showed her one of the binders. Her expression shifted from confusion to horror to rage as she read. When she looked up, her eyes held the same cold fury I'd been carrying for days. "That monster let my son-in-law die thinking he was a failure? Mom, I need you to pretend you don't know any of this at the funeral. Can you do that? Can you be civil to Marcus and Christina until the moment comes?" She gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Sweetheart, I worked in corporate America for 30 years. I can smile at anyone while planning their destruction. But are you sure about this? Once you start, there's no going back. Hunter died believing he was leaving me with nothing. He apologized to me for being poor while Marcus sat on almost $500,000 of our money. There's no going back from that." My mother pulled me into a fierce embrace, and for the first time since hearing those nurses in the courtyard, I let myself cry. Not for the money, not even for the betrayal, but for Hunter, who died carrying guilt that was never his to bear. My mother's embrace loosened slowly, and she pulled back to study my face with those sharp gray eyes that had seen through every childhood lie I'd ever attempted. She smoothed my hair back, a gesture from when I was small, then stood with the kind of determination that had carried her through her own widowhood 15 years prior. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable rain, the kind of steady drizzle that turned Nashville gray and mournful. The funeral home Marcus had selected, at considerable expense he assured me, though of course he'd handle it, stood like a mansion among lesser buildings, all columns and marble that Hunter would have found pretentious. I dressed carefully in the black dress I'd worn to my father's funeral, adding the pearl necklace Hunter had given me on our 5th anniversary. His wedding ring still hung on the chain beneath it, hidden but present. The funeral director, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Garrison, guided me through the final preparations with practiced compassion. The casket Marcus had chosen was elaborate mahogany with brass fixtures, another expense Hunter would have hated, knowing him as someone who found beauty in simple pine and honest craftsmanship. But I nodded and thanked Marcus for his thoughtfulness when he arrived early, his black suit impeccable, his expression arranged in perfect sorrow. "Hunter would be so grateful," Marcus said, clasping my shoulders and looking into my eyes with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "He worried so much about leaving you to handle all this alone. At least I can honor his memory by taking care of these details." Christina arrived moments later, wearing a black designer dress that probably cost more than our monthly rent, her makeup flawless despite the occasional dab at her eyes with a tissue that came away pristine. She hugged me with the kind of careful embrace that protected her outfit from wrinkles, murmuring condolences that sounded rehearsed. The service began at 10 o'clock sharp. The chapel filled with Hunter's construction crew, their rough hands and sun-weathered faces out of place among the funeral home's gentility but genuine in their grief. Several of my colleagues from the hospital attended, along with neighbors from our apartment building and Tony from Romano's, who had closed his restaurant for the morning to pay his respects. When Marcus rose to deliver the eulogy, I felt my mother's hand slip into mine, steady and strong. He walked to the podium with measured steps, pausing to place his hand on Hunter's casket in a gesture of farewell that made my stomach turn. "Hunter Mitchell was more than my best friend," Marcus began, his voice carrying perfectly through the chapel's acoustics. "He was my brother in every way that mattered. From the day we met in freshman year at Tennessee State, two kids with big dreams and empty pockets, I knew he was someone special." He painted a picture of their friendship that was both true and corrupted by his betrayal. The failed landscaping business became a testament to Hunter's work ethic rather than the financial disaster that had nearly bankrupted them both before Marcus went into accounting. Their Sunday football gatherings transformed into profound male bonding rather than the casual social events they'd actually been. "Hunter's final words to me," Marcus said, and his voice cracked with what sounded like authentic emotion, "were about Alexis. He made me promise to look after her, to ensure she wouldn't struggle with the financial burden of his illness. I gave him my word and I intend to keep it." My fingernails dug crescents into my palm as my mother squeezed back, keeping me grounded. Christina watched from the front row, occasionally touching her eyes with tissue, her phone visible in her purse, screen lighting up with notifications she ignored with apparent difficulty. The service concluded with a hymn Hunter had never particularly liked but that Marcus had insisted was his favorite. As people filed past the casket for final viewings, Marcus appeared at my elbow with his leather briefcase, the same one he'd brought to so many chemotherapy sessions. "Alexis, I know this is difficult timing," he said quietly, "but there are some papers that need to be signed today to expedite the insurance payout. The company needs them by close of business and I wanted to spare you having to deal with this later." He guided me toward a small side office Mr. Garrison had made available, my mother following until Marcus suggested she stay with the other guests. "Family business," he said with an apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. The office smelled of old flowers and furniture polish. Marcus spread papers across the desk with efficient movements, yellow tabs marking signature lines. The life insurance claim forms looked standard enough, but I noticed the beneficiary payment instructions had been altered, though the changes were subtle enough that someone drowning in grief might miss them. "Everything's been expedited," Marcus explained, producing an expensive pen from his jacket. "You'll have funds within 72 hours instead of the usual 2 weeks. I called in some favors at Christina's company." I picked up the pen then set it down again. "Marcus, there's something I need to ask you about." Hunter mentioned something in his final hours, when the morphine was making him confused. He kept talking about accounts, about making sure I knew about all the accounts. Marcus's expression shifted minutely, a tightening around his eyes that someone who hadn't been watching for it might miss. "Hunter's medications made him say a lot of things toward the end. The accounts are all in order, I assure you." "He was very specific," I continued, watching his face carefully. "He gave me passwords, insisted I write them down. He kept saying there was more money than I thought, that you would explain everything." The eagerness that flashed across Marcus's features confirmed everything I'd suspected. He leaned forward, his voice taking on a confidential tone. "Hunter might have been confused about some investment accounts I set up on his behalf. Very complicated financial instruments that I was managing to maximize returns. Nothing you need to worry about. I'll continue handling everything as I have been." "So there are other accounts?" I pressed, maintaining the facade of confused widow. "Technical details that would only confuse you during this difficult time," Marcus said smoothly. "Just sign these papers and I'll ensure everything is taken care of." That's what Hunter wanted. Christina appeared in the doorway, her phone in hand. "Marcus, we need to process these before the banks close." "Is she signing?" The impatience in her voice, the casual reference to me as she rather than using my name, the way they both looked at the papers rather than at me. It all confirmed that I was nothing more than an obstacle to them, a signature standing between them and their payday. I picked up the pen again, pretending to review the documents while actually listening to the sounds from beyond the office. Through the thin walls, I could hear car doors slamming in the parking lot, multiple vehicles arriving simultaneously. Actually, I said, setting the pen down once more, I'd like my mother to review these first. She has experience with financial documents. Marcus's jaw tightened. Alexis, these need to be filed today. The insurance company can wait another day, I said, standing up. Hunter just died. I'm not signing anything without proper review. Christina's phone buzzed urgently. She glanced at it and the color drained from her perfectly made-up face. Marcus, she said, her voice sharp with panic. We have a problem. Marcus's phone continued buzzing in Christina's hand as she stared at the screen, her perfectly composed face cracking like expensive porcelain. The accounts, she whispered, her voice rising to a pitch that drew attention from the outer reception area. They're frozen. All of them. The FBI has frozen everything. The briefcase slipped from Marcus's grip, hitting the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the small office. Papers scattered across the carpet. Insurance forms, bank documents, forged signatures visible even from where I stood. His face cycled through expressions rapidly. Confusion, disbelief. Then the dawning realization that his carefully constructed scheme was collapsing. This is a misunderstanding, Marcus said, his voice steady but his hands trembling as he bent to gather the scattered documents. Alexis, whatever you think is happening here, you're wrong. I've been protecting your assets, managing them through a difficult time. Hunter asked me to. The office door opened fully and Agent Sarah Davies entered with 2 other federal agents, their badges visible on their belts. The funeral guests in the reception area began to notice the commotion, conversations dying as they turned toward the office. Marcus Porter, Agent Davies said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in earshot freeze. You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Marcus straightened slowly, the papers in his hands forgotten. His sophisticated businessman facade cracked, revealing something desperate and cornered beneath. This is insane. I want my lawyer. Alexis, tell them Hunter wanted me to manage everything. Hunter wanted his medical treatments paid for, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. He wanted to live. He wanted to stop apologizing for being poor while you sat on $487,000 of our money. Marcus lunged for the door, dropping the remaining papers as he tried to push past Agent Davies. I need to make a call. This is a mistake. I have meetings, obligations. A second agent blocked his path while Davies began reading his Miranda rights. Marcus's composure shattered completely as he realized there was no escape route. You don't understand, he said, his voice climbing. I was protecting those funds. The medical expenses would have drained everything. I was being strategic, ensuring Alexis would have something left after. After my husband died? I interrupted, stepping closer despite my mother's restraining hand on my arm. You mean after he died thinking he was a failure? After he spent his last conscious moments apologizing to me for leaving me with nothing? Christina's shriek cut through the tension. I didn't know anything about this. She backed against the wall, her designer heels catching on the scattered papers. Marcus handled everything. I just processed paperwork. Standard insurance forms. I had no idea. Standard insurance forms that redirected payments to accounts in Colorado? Agent Davies asked, producing handcuffs. Forms with your digital signature authorizing transfers? We have 18 months of email correspondence between you and Mr. Porter discussing, and I quote, the Mitchell gold mine. Christina's carefully styled hair began falling from its pins as she shook her head violently. He made me do it. Marcus said it was legal, that we were helping. These people, she gestured wildly at me, they didn't understand finance. Someone had to manage their money properly. We were too stupid, you mean? My mother stepped forward, her voice deadly quiet. Too trusting, too focused on saving my son-in-law's life to notice you bleeding them dry. The funeral guests had begun gathering in the doorway, Hunter's construction crew standing bewildered as they watched their friend's funeral transform into a crime scene. Tony from Romano's had his phone out, recording everything with the shocked expression of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. Christina's mask slipped entirely. "Yes," she screamed, mascara running in black streams down her cheeks. "You were too trusting. Who gives power of attorney to someone without reading the fine print? Who doesn't check their own accounts for 8 months? You practically handed us that money." I pulled the binders from my bag, the ones I'd prepared with Agent Davies's guidance. "Every transaction," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Every redirected payment. The Colorado property you bought 2 months ago for $300,000. The investment accounts in the Cayman Islands. The emails where you laughed about Hunter dying before he could figure it out." Marcus's business partner Jordan pushed through the crowd, his face purple with rage. "You used our firm's accounts?" He held his phone up, showing a message. "Harriman just pulled out of the acquisition. That was a $50 million deal, Marcus. You destroyed everything we built for $500,000. Marcus's phone rang incessantly in his pocket as Agent Davies secured the handcuffs. Each ring represented another domino falling. Investors withdrawing, clients demanding explanations, partners distancing themselves from the unfolding scandal. Several funeral guests were now live streaming, their phones capturing every moment of Marcus's destruction. "Please," Marcus said, his voice breaking as he looked at the gathering crowd of Hunter's friends and colleagues. "This isn't what it looks like. I was trying to help. The medical system is broken. I was protecting them from predatory medical costs." "You were the predator," interrupted James, Hunter's foreman from the construction crew. "Hunter talked about you like a brother. He died thinking you were taking care of his wife." I opened one of the binders, reading aloud from an email dated 3 weeks ago. Christina writes, "Hunter's declining fast. We should prepare to transfer everything once he's gone. Alexis is too emotional to ask questions. I can have the death certificates expedited through my department." The funeral home had descended into complete chaos. Marcus's professional contacts fled the scene, making hurried phone calls to protect their own interests. The FBI agents began escorting Marcus and Christina toward the exit, but Christina broke free momentarily, stumbling in her designer heels. "You think you've won?" she spat at me, her perfect composure entirely shattered. "You think getting your money back brings Hunter back? You're still a widow. Still alone. At least we knew how to take advantage of an opportunity when we saw one." My mother moved faster than I could react, stepping between us with the kind of protective fury I hadn't seen since childhood. "An opportunity? My son-in-law's death was an opportunity? You're not just a thief, you're a monster." Agent Davies and her team resumed control, leading Marcus and Christina through the crowd of funeral guests. Marcus kept muttering about misunderstandings, about lawyers, about Hunter's wishes, but his words were drowned out by the buzzing of phones and the shocked conversations of witnesses. Jordan stood in the wreckage of the office, staring at his phone as message after message arrived. 15 years, he said to no one in particular. 15 years building this firm, and he destroyed it in 8 months for a dying man's money. The investment deal's collapse played out in real time on Jordan's phone screen. The primary investor's withdrawal triggered a cascade of secondary pullouts. The acquisition target withdrew from negotiations. The firm's credit line was frozen pending investigation. By the time the FBI vehicles pulled away with Marcus and Christina inside, Porter and Associates existed only as a name on a building that would be vacated by morning. I stood in the funeral home office, surrounded by scattered evidence of betrayal, while Hunter's friends and colleagues struggled to process what they'd witnessed. The funeral that was meant to celebrate Hunter's life had instead revealed the depths of human greed and the price of misplaced trust. The funeral home fell into stunned silence after the FBI vehicles disappeared down the rain-slicked street. Tony from Romano's lowered his phone, the video still recording as he processed what he'd witnessed. Hunter's construction crew stood in bewildered clusters, their grief now complicated by rage at the betrayal of a man they'd welcomed into their circle. Mr. Garrison, the funeral director, appeared in the office doorway, his professional composure shaken as he surveyed the scattered documents across his carpet. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said carefully, "perhaps we should move forward with the burial. Your husband deserves that dignity regardless of this situation." He was right. Hunter's casket still waited in the chapel, and the cemetery had allocated time for the graveside service. We proceeded with heavy hearts and confused minds. A smaller group now as Marcus's business associates had fled. At the graveside, Hunter's foreman James spoke simple words about honest work and loyal friendship that carried more truth than Marcus's elaborate eulogy ever could. 3 days after the funeral, Agent Davies called requesting a meeting at the federal building. My mother accompanied me to the sterile conference room where 3 agents waited with boxes of documents and a revelation that stole my breath. Mrs. Mitchell, as we've investigated Mr. Porter's finances, we've uncovered something significant, Agent Davies began, sliding a folder across the table. Your husband wasn't his only victim. We've identified 6 other families over the past 3 years, all following the same pattern. Terminal illness, power of attorney, redirected insurance payments. The folder contained names and faces of people I'd never met but whose stories mirrored mine with devastating precision. A teacher with brain cancer whose wife thought they'd lost their house to medical debt. A small business owner with ALS whose family sold everything while Marcus hoarded their insurance payouts. A young mother with leukemia whose husband worked 3 jobs thinking they were bankrupt. $2 million total, Agent Davies continued. This qualifies as a pattern of racketeering activity. We're pursuing RICO charges, which means we can dismantle not just Marcus and Christina but their entire network. Every lawyer who notarized suspicious documents, every bank employee who looked the other way, every accomplice who facilitated this scheme. The young mother's photograph held my attention. She had Hunter's same exhausted eyes, that look of someone fighting a battle they knew they were losing while carrying guilt about the financial burden. Her husband's statement described how she'd refused pain medication toward the end, trying to save money. Southeastern Insurance Group has launched their own investigation, another agent added. Christina's involvement has exposed systemic failures in their oversight. Her entire department is under review. She'll never work in insurance again, assuming she ever gets out of prison. The financial recovery began 2 weeks later. The court ordered the immediate release of frozen accounts, and a federal judge authorized the seizure of Marcus and Christina's assets to compensate victims. The Colorado property sold at auction, the proceeds distributed among the 7 families they'd defrauded. By the end of the month, I received a check for $537,000. Our original money plus interest generated in those hidden accounts. I held that check in our empty apartment, sitting in Hunter's rocking chair, feeling the weight of money that should have bought him experimental treatments, better care, or at least the peace of mind in his final days. My mother sat across from me, reading updates from Jordan about Marcus's firm's complete implosion. 17 lawsuits filed in the first week, she read from her phone. Previous clients demanding forensic accounting reviews. The building management terminated their lease for reputational damage to the property. The state bar is pursuing permanent disbarment. Porter and Associates had occupied 3 floors of a prestigious downtown high-rise. Within a month, those offices were empty, the furniture liquidated at auction, the brass nameplate removed and sold for scrap. Financial journals ran cautionary articles about the importance of oversight when granting power of attorney. Marcus's name became synonymous with predatory fraud in professional circles. His former partner Jordan called me once, his voice hollow with exhaustion. 15 years of building our reputation gone. Every client we ever had is under review. My own accounts are frozen pending investigation, even though I knew nothing about his scheme. He didn't just steal from dying people, Alexis. He destroyed everyone who ever trusted him. Even Marcus's defense attorney, a high-profile criminal lawyer who'd initially taken the case for its publicity value, withdrew representation after reviewing the evidence. His public statement claimed irreconcilable differences in legal strategy, but sources told Agent Davies he'd privately called Marcus's actions indefensible. I received Hunter's complete medical records as part of the investigation's discovery process. Reading through his final days, I found Dr. Morrison's notes from Hunter's last conscious hours. Patient expressed repeated concern about leaving wife with financial burden. Requested confirmation that friend Marcus Porter was managing affairs appropriately. Reassured patient that his arrangements appeared to be in order. Patient seemed peaceful after discussion. Hunter had died believing Marcus was protecting me. That small mercy meant everything. He'd never known about the betrayal, never had to reconcile the brother he'd trusted with the predator who'd exploited his dying days. His last thoughts of Marcus were of gratitude for a friendship that had been a performance, but at least Hunter never knew the truth. The sentencing hearing arrived 6 months after Hunter's death, on what would have been our 13th anniversary. The federal courthouse downtown was newer than the funeral home but carried the same institutional coldness. Marcus and Christina appeared in orange jumpsuits, their designer clothes and careful grooming replaced by prison uniforms and reality. The judge, a severe woman named Patricia Hawkins, reviewed the charges with methodical precision. Wire fraud, conspiracy, insurance fraud, racketeering. The list continued for several minutes. Other victims provided statements, their stories creating a chorus of betrayal and loss that filled the courtroom with palpable grief. When my turn came to provide a victim impact statement, I stood slowly, my prepared remarks forgotten. Instead, I looked directly at Marcus and Christina, seeing them clearly for the first time, not as sophisticated professionals or trusted friends, but as ordinary criminals who'd simply dressed better than most. Hunter died apologizing to me, I said, my voice carrying through the silent courtroom. His last coherent words were about failing to provide for me, about leaving me with nothing. You manufactured that guilt. You took a dying man's peace of mind and turned it into profit. Marcus tried to maintain eye contact but looked away as I continued. You didn't just steal money. You stole Hunter's dignity in his final days. You killed him twice. Once when the cancer took his body, and once when you took his belief that he'd been a good husband who'd provided for his wife. Christina began crying, but they were the tears of someone sorry they'd been caught, not someone who felt genuine remorse. The judge's expression remained impassive as she delivered the sentences. Marcus received 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of early release. Christina received 8 years, her lesser involvement reflected in the shorter term but still devastating for someone who'd never imagined consequences for her actions. As the bailiffs led them away, Marcus turned back once, his mouth opening as if to speak. But there were no words that could undo what he'd done, no explanation that would restore what he'd taken. The courtroom doors closed behind them with a final thud that echoed like the closing of Hunter's casket, an ending that brought justice but no real peace. I walked out of the courthouse into October sunshine that felt inappropriate for the weight of what had just concluded. My mother linked her arm through mine as we descended the stone steps, neither of us speaking about the 12 and 8-year sentences that had just been handed down. Justice had been served, but it tasted hollow in my mouth like medicine that cures the disease but leaves you forever changed. The recovered funds sat in my bank account like a question mark. $537,000 that should have bought Hunter more time, better treatment, or at least peace of mind. The life insurance payout added another $300,000 to that sum. Together, it was more money than Hunter and I had ever dreamed of having, and all I could think about was how he'd apologized for leaving me with nothing. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I met with a nonprofit attorney named David Reeves in a small office overlooking the Cumberland River. He specialized in establishing foundations and he listened patiently as I explained my vision. An organization that would provide financial advocacy for cancer patients, protecting them from predators during their most vulnerable moments. The Hunter Mitchell Foundation, I said, testing the words aloud for the first time. Free financial review services, legal assistance with power of attorney documents, and education about common fraud schemes targeting terminal patients. David nodded, making notes on his legal pad. We can structure it as a 501c3, tax-exempt status, able to accept donations. With your initial funding, you could help dozens of families in the first year alone. We spent 3 hours outlining the foundation's mission, and by the time I left his office, Hunter's name had begun its transformation from a grave marker to a shield protecting others. The paperwork would take months to finalize, but the purpose was clear. No one else should die believing they'd failed their family when they'd actually been robbed. A month later, an envelope arrived with no return address, the handwriting elderly and careful. Inside, a letter that made me sit down hard at my kitchen table. Dear Mrs. Mitchell, it began. My name is Dorothy Porter. Marcus is my son. I've followed the news coverage of his trial, and I need you to know how deeply sorry I am for what he did to you and your husband. The letter continued for 3 pages. Dorothy's shaking handwriting revealing a mother's anguish and long-suppressed truths. She described Marcus as a child who'd always taken more than his share, who'd manipulated his younger siblings and charmed his way out of consequences. She admitted to making excuses for him, believing his promises to change, enabling behavior she now recognized as pathological. "I've withdrawn my retirement savings," she wrote near the end. $43,000 that I'd planned to live on, but I can't stomach the thought of comfort bought with blindness to my son's cruelty. I'm donating it to your foundation in Hunter's memory. It won't undo the damage, but perhaps it can help prevent future harm. The check was already included, made out to the Hunter Mitchell Foundation with, "In memory of Hunter Mitchell and all those betrayed by trust," written in the memo line. I cried over that letter, not from sadness but from the unexpected grace of a mother choosing justice over her own child's defense. The foundation's establishment coincided with a bigger decision. Our apartment in Nashville held too many ghosts: Hunter's empty chair, the dining table where we'd planned a future that would never arrive, the walls that had witnessed both our love and his decline. I needed somewhere new, somewhere Hunter's memory could inspire rather than haunt. Hunter had grown up in Sweetwater, Tennessee, a small town nestled in the foothills of the Appalachians. He'd told stories about it during chemotherapy treatments, painting pictures of the old farmhouse where his grandfather had taught him carpentry, the barn that had served as his first workshop. When I drove there to visit his grave, we'd buried him in the family plot beside his parents. I found his grandfather's property was for sale. James, Hunter's foreman, arrived the next weekend with 3 trucks full of construction workers. "Hunter helped every one of us at some point," he said simply. "Time we returned the favor." They worked for 2 months, transforming the dilapidated farmhouse into something beautiful. The barn, where Hunter had dreamed of one day having his professional workshop, became a grief counseling center with space for support groups and financial planning sessions. We installed a small plaque by the door, the Hunter Mitchell Center for Patient Advocacy. The foundation's first case came through Dr. Morrison's referral, a young family with a 5-year-old daughter fighting leukemia. The father's business partner had offered to manage their finances during treatment, presenting paperwork eerily similar to what Marcus had used. Our volunteer attorney reviewed the documents, found the hidden redirections, and helped the family maintain control of their assets. The little girl received her bone marrow transplant on schedule, funded by insurance payments that actually reached their intended destination. Spring arrived gradually in Sweetwater, dogwood blossoms appearing like hope after winter's grief. On the first anniversary of Hunter's death, I sat beside his headstone with a thermos of coffee from Romano's. Tony had mailed it specifically for this occasion, and a folder of updates about the foundation's work. "We helped 17 families this year," I told the polished granite marker, running my fingers across his name. "That teenage girl in Memphis whose father was dying of kidney disease. His best friend was pulling the same scam Marcus did. We caught it in time. Her dad got his transplant." The cemetery was quiet except for birds and distant traffic. I pulled out Dorothy Porter's letter, reading her words aloud so Hunter would know that even Marcus's mother had chosen justice over denial. "You didn't leave me with nothing," I said, my voice steady now with conviction rather than grief. "You left me with 8 months of fighting alongside you, watching you face the impossible with grace. You left me with the strength to recognize betrayal and the courage to fight back. You left me with a purpose." A wind chime someone had hung on a nearby tree rang softly, and I chose to interpret it as Hunter's acknowledgement. The foundation would continue growing, protecting families from predators who prey on grief and desperation. Marcus and Christina would serve their sentences while Hunter's name would serve a higher purpose, transforming from one man's mortality into countless families' protection. If this story of betrayal and justice kept you riveted until the very end, please hit that like button right now. My most powerful moment was hearing those nurses reveal Marcus's fraud while Alexis stood frozen in that hospital courtyard, her entire world shifting in an instant. What moment hit you the hardest? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories of resilience and redemption. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.